Alright, hello. Welcome to another video. There was a video before this one, and there's gonna be a video after this one. So welcome, and thank you for being here for this video. Today I'm gonna be talking about my experiences in the psychiatric hospital. I've been hospitalized at least 7 times. I don't know, really, I've lost count. But it's been quite a few. And ever since I was 17, it was the first time I went to the psych hospital. So I have some experience with it. The psychiatric hospital or behavioral hospital or psychiatric facility, these are separate hospitals from the regular old hospital that you go to for your medical care. And they're basically, they serve essentially the same function as asylums back in the day. It's somewhere that you can send a mentally ill person where they're going to be contained and supposedly receive some kind of care. But whether or not they receive that care is kind of up for debate, and your mileage may vary when it comes to going to the psych hospital to actually get psychiatric care. The staff there that you're going to be interacting with the most in a behavioral hospital are the BHAs, the Behavioral Health Associates, and the nursing staff. The nursing staff, they sit at their nurses' station in the main hallway usually, and they're the ones that give everybody their medications at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and before bed or whatever. Whenever people need their medications, they line up and at the nurses' station, and the nurses will give them their medication. And that's pretty much what they do. There's other things too, right? If you need some non-psychiatric medications that you take outside of the hospital, then they'll keep those in their nurses' station so you can take those as needed as well, or as prescribed. The BHAs, Behavioral Health Associates, they're not really mental health professionals. They're closer to like peer supporters than anything. They aren't trained in therapy. They aren't trained in psychiatry. Basically, their training is to just sort of check up on people, on the patients. Every 15 minutes, a BHA will come by and do a checkup where they note down your location and whatever you're doing. And sometimes they'll ask you a question, how are you doing, or whatever. And then they go off and do that for everybody. Every 15 minutes they have to do this. They're also the ones that sort of just supervise. They make sure that things are going smoothly, that people aren't getting into fights, and that people are going to their therapies and stuff like that. And sometimes they'll run a group thing. Not a group therapy, because they're not trained to do therapy, so they can't really do that. Sometimes they will if the therapist has called out for the day or something, and they just have the worksheet and they have the curriculum. Sometimes they're allowed to do the group therapies, but usually what they do is just the morning and the nighttime checkups, where they make sure everybody's awake in the morning and make sure nobody escaped in the middle of the night or whatever, and then at nighttime they get your mood and how you're feeling, how your day went, and again just check on you. And they'll do this every morning and every night as a group. Like, all the patients will come to the common room and they'll do it as a group. And it's the same with the therapies. We do it as a group. Now, the types of therapy that are provided in the hospital, it's group therapy, which means that we're all kind of sitting in the same room talking about a particular subject. And usually it has something to do with CBT or DBT. There's usually a worksheet that they hand out. Sometimes you get a pen and you can write or draw or whatever. The most fun and interesting therapies they have are music therapy and art therapy, which are exactly what they sound like. The music therapist is just a musician that will come in and play some music for us. We can do sing-alongs and talk about what the lyrics mean and stuff like that. And art therapy is just, the art therapist is an artist that comes in with a bunch of art supplies, papers, and stuff that we can draw and paint or whatever, and we have an assignment that's relevant to mental health, like draw your dream life or whatever. And it's very both of them, to be honest, are kind of childish, kind of immature, kind of just sort of let loose and don't be an adult right now type of stuff. And that's why they're helpful, in my opinion. That's why they're the best ones. CBT and DBT, they could be helpful if you don't know anything about CBT and DBT, but you know, at this point in my life, group therapy is more annoying and boring to me than anything, because I've already taken everything I need from CBT and DBT that I've learned so far over years and years of doing these things. So to me, group therapy is just very like boring, and it doesn't really help me. But if you're in the hospital and you don't show up to the group therapies, you tend to not get out. They tend to not let you out. You might see a psychiatrist like once. If you're there for a week, you might see a psychiatrist once or twice. And it's not really like a session like you would get for outpatient services. It's more just they ask you if you're suicidal and if you still need to be here. And if you say yes, then you get to stay. And if you say no, then they'll consider letting you out if you've been going to the group therapies and if you've been reporting your mood as positive and all of this stuff. Now, personally, I don't find the hospital all that helpful. Like I said, I've been in the hospital many times, and I mean, the first couple times I went willingly, but after that, I realized that it wasn't really helping me, and it wasn't really doing anything for me, and really it was just more, it's just a period of confinement more than anything, where I don't have really access to the outside world. They take your phone, because of patient privacy, phones can record, so they take your phone. You do have a landline that you can call if you remember numbers, but there's no access to the internet or anything like that. They might look up a number that's publicly available, but if you haven't written down your family's phone numbers and stuff, you're just not going to be able to contact them. So there's no contact, no communication, no access to the outside world, and you're just there, I mean, bored, doing whatever, right? Going to the group therapies, and I mean, the common room will have a TV. It might be playing some movies or something. It'll have like games, like card games and chess and checkers and stuff like that. Puzzles, crosswords, coloring pages. Sometimes they have some shitty books that were donated. You're rarely gonna find any like actually good books in the hospital. But also the hospital is the only place that I read books, because there's nothing else to do, really. It's like one of the most interesting things to do in the hospital. And it's just an extended period of confinement and boredom for me. That's all it is. And, you know, it might provide some kind of physical relief, since I get to sleep in a bed and I get 3 meals a day for free. But the entire time I'm in the hospital, I'm usually worrying about like my car being out in the hospital parking lot or wherever it was left when the police came and got me. Because usually when you go to the hospital, it's because you had a mental breakdown and the police came and took you to the ER, which then transferred you to the psych hospital. And so, for example, if that were to happen to me right now, my car would be here at this park. I would have no way to contact the people that run the park to let them know what has happened to me and why my car is there. I would have no way to contact somebody that could move my car for me. I would have my keys probably either in the car or on my person, which would then be taken and put in a bag with all of my possessions, like my phone and my wallet and all that. And you know, my car would just be here, and most likely it would get towed. And then when I get out of the hospital, I wouldn't know where it is. I would have to pay several $100s probably to get it out, depending on how long I was in the hospital. It just wouldn't be a good situation. It would ruin me, right? It would just ruin me. So right now, I cannot afford to go to the hospital. I just can't. And it's kind of been like that. There's been situations like that. The previous few times that I've been in the hospital, it's not beneficial, and it's really more like, you know, what happens is people get taken away from their jobs, people get taken away from their work, and they get fired because they're in the hospital for 2 weeks and they have no way to really contact their boss. Or even if they do contact their boss and say, hey, I'm in the hospital, here's what's going on, not every employer is going to be understanding about that, and people do get fired. People lose their jobs all the time because they go to the hospital. And what they say when you go to the hospital and you have concerns about your outside life, about your responsibilities that you need to keep up with constantly, they'll say, well, you're here to focus on your mental health. Don't think about that outside stuff. You're basically on a mental vacation right now. So while you're here, don't think about all that stuff that's stressing you out on the outside. But the problem with that is that if you're going to bring me to the hospital and it's going to have an effect on my outside life, just the fact that I'm in the hospital, then I do need to think about that. I do need to think about that, because if I get out of the hospital and I'm in a worse situation because I've lost my job, I've lost my car, which is my home, you know, I've lost friends or whatever, I've lost my place to live. This has happened as well, where I go to the hospital and when I get out, people I was living with are like, no, you're too crazy for us. You're not allowed to live here anymore. So now I don't have a place to live, right? This happens, and I need to think about these. These are responsibilities that don't go away just because I'm having a bad mental health day and I ended up going to the hospital for 2 weeks. Where, by the way, usually my bad mental health day would be over within a couple days. Instead, I have to go to the hospital and prove that I'm like okay to return to normal life. So in my experience, it's more harmful than helpful. It just takes me away from my responsibilities and stresses me out even more in regards to those. Rather than actually helping me with my responsibilities, they're framing it as like a break, right? As like a break from those responsibilities. Problem is, like I said, those things still happen while you're in the hospital. You still have to think about them. You still have to, you still have responsibilities, and those don't end just because you're in the hospital taking a break that you may or may not have consented to. And by the way, you can get taken to the hospital non-consensually. It's called a 302 or an involuntary hospitalization, and there's nothing you can do about it. You will get taken to the hospital by the police, you get taken to the ER, and then they will actually keep a police officer in the hospital with you to make sure you don't leave until you get transferred to the psych facility, which has locked doors and bars over the windows and everything. It's essentially a prison. It's a small prison. They don't treat you as bad as they do in prison, but I mean, it's a lot of people have described it as very similar to prison. And some people who have been to both prison and the hospital say that they would prefer prison over the hospital, because there's more things to do in prison. There's more things to entertain yourself with in prison, believe it or not. And you're not forced to take all these different medications that you may not want to take and participate in all these group therapies that you may not want to do. Basically, no consideration for the patient's like actual outside life is taken. I mean, they'll ask you what's going on because it's relevant to like why you're here. But again, they treat it as if it's like a mental break and you really shouldn't be thinking about that stuff right now. Speaking of it being prison-like, the decor is often like every hospital I've ever been to, and I've been to multiple across the country, every single one is white walls, boring tile floors, no carpet, nothing soft. Even the room that they set aside, usually in each ward there's a room that they have that's like a quiet room where you can go and be isolated from everybody else. Even that room usually has like a plastic chair and tile floors and maybe one painting on the wall. And it's just boring. And if you're lucky, your window will have a view of the outdoors, but usually it goes out into just the courtyard. So you're going to be seeing like a little bit of a field of grass and some sidewalks and a big tall 12-foot tall wall with maybe even barbed wire on top. I remember one time I was in the hospital and I saw this picture, this photo on the wall of a place, like a nature park that I had been to, the hiking trails. And I'd been to this place a couple times in person, and now I was stuck in the hospital looking at a picture of it on the wall and just really wishing that I could actually go outside and go out there and be there, because I felt like that place would be better for my mental health than being stuck in this essentially like confinement kind of situation with the white walls and all of the other people having their mental breakdowns and all of the staff not really equipped to help me with my actual problems. And I was just staring at this picture just being like, this is ridiculous, and it's almost insulting for them to put this picture here in front of me. It's like it's teasing me almost, like you've trapped me in this place and now you're showing me a picture of a place that I would much rather be, that would probably help me a lot more. So it's kind of like that's how I feel when I'm in the hospital. It's like I don't want to be there. And most of the time, like I said, ever since the first couple times that I went to the hospital and I realized that it's not a great place to be, every time I've gone afterwards, I was either coerced or I was 302'd, involuntary. And by coerced, I mean basically they're saying like, look, if you go in 302, which is what you're gonna do if you don't consent to this, if you go in involuntarily, they're going to keep you there as long as they want to keep you there. You're not going to have a say in when you get out. But if you go in voluntarily, if you say that you're going involuntarily, then as soon as you get there, you can go up to the nurse's station and say, I would like to sign a 72-hour hold. And you sign that paper, and 72 hours, not including the weekends, after your intake, you get discharged, regardless of, unless they decide that you're an imminent risk still, which all you have to do is say that you're not to get out of that situation. So that's what I mean by coerced, is in like, I'm going to the hospital one way or another, but what they tell me is if you say that you're going involuntarily, then you have some autonomy as to when you leave. But if you don't say you're going involuntarily, then they're gonna keep you as long as they want to. Now, I have another video on my channel called 988 Ineffective and Dangerous, and it's about the 988 suicide hotline here in the United States, and how they can non-consensually call the police to track the caller and have the caller sent to the hospital 302 involuntarily. And this is their protocol for if somebody calls and they are determined to be an imminent risk. So if you call the suicide hotline and you say, I'm suicidal, please help, their protocol is to call the police, who will then track you, who will then put you in the back of their car, take you to the ER, and then take you to the hospital. This is a couple times that I've been in the hospital, that's how it happened to me. And these are the kinds of coercion tactics that they will use to get you into the hospital without a fight, basically. Just make it a little bit easier for them. Say, if you go in voluntarily, then you get some control. If you go in involuntary, then we're gonna have to do all this paperwork, and then also they're not gonna let you out. So on top of all this, the hospital stays are expensive, and I'm in debt. I'm in medical debt with a couple of these hospitals, a couple different ones. I even have one of them called a debt collector who's now trying to get in contact with me. And obviously I'm ignoring it because I'm homeless and I have bigger priorities to spend my money on. But I am in debt because these are expensive hospital stays. And once again, never helped me. I've never exited these hospitals better off than I went in. Never. Not a single time. Usually I go in and I'm in a worse situation because I've lost my job, or I've had a mental breakdown and now I'm not allowed to live where I was living, or my car has been towed, or whatever else. All three of those things have happened to me, and I've just never come out of the hospital better off than when I went in. Never. And so now I'm saddled with debt on top of not having any benefit from their services. I have to pay for them because my insurance, which is state insurance, didn't cover the full stay. They cover, I think, 72 hours. They cover the first 72 hours. So if I was involuntarily admitted to the hospital, again, I have no say on when I leave. I have no say on how long I stay there. I have no say on, I'm just there until they decide that I get to leave. And my insurance company decides not to pay after the first 3 days, and the hospital decides I need to stay longer than 3 days. The insurance company's not paying for it. Now I have debt. This is my experience with these hospitals. I would recommend, if you are in a crisis and you feel the need to call a suicide hotline or go to a hospital or have some kind of mental vacation, try it out, but make sure that you have a safety net for when you get out. Make sure that when you get out of the hospital, you're not going to be kicked out of your home. Make sure when you get out of the hospital, you're not going to lose your job or your car or your transportation or anything like that. Make sure that you're going to be at least right back where you were when you get out of the hospital. Because most likely, they're really not going to care about any of your problems that happen on the outside. They're really not going to care about that. They're going to act like they do because they're going to ask about it because it's like relevant to your mental health, but they don't really care. What they care about is you saying that you're doing okay and that you can face life again, so you can get out there and do it, regardless of if you actually are. Regardless of if you actually are ready. That's what they're looking for. So don't go in involuntary. If you feel the need to take a mental vacation, and you think the hospital might be a good idea, like I said, go in on your own terms. Make sure that you're not going in as an emergency or as a 302. And you can actually call the hospital and ask for an admission, or you can just go to the ER and tell them that you think you might hurt yourself and you want to go to a psychiatric facility, and they'll start the intake process from there. You can skip the police entirely. Don't call 988, don't call any hotlines and get the police called on you, and if you can help it, right? If you feel like you're on the verge of a mental breakdown or a meltdown that's going to get people's attention and get the cops called on you, just go to the ER instead and skip that entire process. That alone will help a lot, because now you're doing it voluntarily, and like I said, you can sign that 72-hour hold and you can get out on your own terms after 72 hours. And again, I highly recommend make sure that you're going to be okay when you get out. Make sure that you're not going to lose your job. Let your boss know what's going on, and make sure they're not going to fire you if you end up staying for a month or whatever, right? Because you never know really if they decide to keep you or not, depending on what you say. Over the years, I've learned what to say and what to do and how to act to get out of the hospital ASAP. But if you don't know these things, sometimes you might say something a little off color about your mood or whatever, and now the psychiatrist has decided, the psychiatrist you see once a week has now, a BHA has told them or signed it on your report or whatever that you're talking about this, you're talking about hurting yourself or whatever you said. And now the psychiatrist has decided you need another week in the hospital and they're not going to let you out. So just be careful. Just be careful. If you feel like it could help, I'm not going to say don't go to the hospital. But these are my experiences with it. Like I said, I've never gotten out of the hospital better off than I went in. They've never really helped me. I've gotten into bad circumstances. I've been kicked out of places, lost jobs, lost my car, etc. Hello, I was editing and I realized I completely forgot to talk about an entire category of experiences that come with the hospital. When it comes to the BHAs and the nurses, they're just human beings, and sometimes they have biases that they bring to work with them, and obviously they're trained not to say offensive things to people's face, but I have had experiences where BHAs or a nurse just didn't like me as a person. Which is kind of ridiculous because, when you're working in these hospital settings, you're not seeing somebody at their normal state. You're seeing somebody in a very different circumstance from what they normally experience and how they normally act. Like, I know when I'm in the hospital, I kind of let loose because I know I'm not going to get in too much trouble for being rude or something like that. So I just unmask, right? And sometimes the BHAs and the nurses, they take issue with that. But it's something that kind of comes with the job, and I feel like you chose this job for a reason. You can't have your personal biases impacting the way you act with the people. But I've had BHAs say things behind my back about me being trans and stuff like that, which another patient told me, and it affects the way that they act around you. And that's a little bit scary to think about. I've had nurses roll their eyes and scoff at me because I asked for an anxiety medication. And if you are any kind of minority whatsoever, definitely be more careful in the hospital, because the staff will bring their personal biases with them, and they have a power dynamic over you. It's not you are trapped there. It's supposed to be the same dynamic as if you were in a medical hospital and you had actual doctors and nurses, and you're the patient, you need to respect the staff, but you're the patient and you're there to get cares, and they are serving you and they're getting paid a lot to do it. But BHAs and the nurses at these behavioral facilities, they don't get paid a whole lot to do what they're doing, and you're trapped there, and they know that they have some power over you. So that's something to keep in mind too if you're going to end up going to the hospital. That kind of thing can happen. There can be personal discrimination because the staff kind of bring their biases with you, or maybe they just decide they don't like you. Maybe they were the type of, think about it. There's a whole lot of nurses, and I love nurses. I love anybody that goes into the nursing profession because they really, really want to help people, and because they really, want to serve people and make people feel well, and, bring them some happiness and joy in a time when they're not feeling very well. That's amazing. And I love nurses that actually can achieve that. But some people go into nursing because they think, they want to have a little bit of power over a sick person. And that type of person does exist. And they also work in these mental facilities, these psychiatric facilities. So just keep that in mind, and keep your eye open for that kind of thing, and protect yourself from it if you end up in the hospital. And I'm not the only person with these experiences or that's reporting experiences like this. like I said, my video about 988 is also on my channel. You can check that out. The report is made by translifeline.org, and they gathered a whole bunch of data and interviewed a bunch of people that have experiences with calling 988 and with going to the hospitals. And they have a whole section on people's experiences in the psychiatric hospital and how 988 is like a pipeline to this ineffective service. And so it's kind of known that this service is not great, that these hospitals are not great. They're not really doing their job. They're not really equipped to help people in the way that they're promising. And oftentimes people end up in worse situations than when they get out, because these hospitals, they don't have any regard for your outside life. They treat it as if it's a mental vacation and that you shouldn't be thinking about anything on the outside. And it's really frustrating. And of course you can talk about, like I said, you can talk about the things on the outside. This is what most people are going to be talking about in the group therapies, is like whatever is on the outside that's bothering them. But the hospital is not going to solve those issues. The best they can do is try to give you some mental coping strategies, some cognitive coping strategies like CBT and DBT, and maybe sign you up to some outpatient services, outpatient therapy and psychiatry, and maybe a caseworker. Now, I have my own issues with those services, but I will say that if you go to the hospital, you don't have a therapist, you don't have a psychiatrist, and you don't have a case manager, these things could actually be helpful to you. If you're struggling to get signed up to outpatient services like that, you don't know how to find a therapist or a psychiatrist, or you don't know how to navigate the insurance and stuff, these people will actually do that for you and set up the appointment for you. So you go and then you continue your care once you're outside of the hospital. That's the one thing they've done for me that has ever been helpful. But I don't see therapists anymore, I don't see a psychiatrist anymore, I don't take medications, and I don't have a case manager, because over the years my goals have diverged from the goals of what a case manager would do for me, and I find that those services just aren't helpful to me at this point in my life. But if you think that that could be helpful, if you're having issues with your life that you think a case manager could help with, you know, signing up to government programs, housing programs, stuff like that, case manager could help. And if you struggle to find out how to get that stuff or to sign up for that kind of stuff, going to the hospital, they will do it for you if you ask. So that is the one thing that they do. But personally, I refuse to ever go to the hospital again. If I can help it, I'm not going to the hospital again. It's just, I don't see the point in it. It just doesn't help me. I know how to do all the things that they would do for me now, right? I know how to get my own case manager and therapist and all that. And I'm also not interested in those services at this point in time. So I'm staying out of the hospital because I don't want my car to get towed. And I would literally rather be out here in the cold and in the snow than go to the hospital and spend my time in a warm bed with 3 meals a day, because it's just boring and they're manipulative and it's not a great place to be. My experiences with group therapy involve a lot of misinformation and a lot of ignoring the real problems. Like CBT has issues, especially for autistic people, and CBT and DBT are the two that they do the most in these group therapies. DBT is okay. I think DBT is alright because it has more to do with like the things that you say about yourself and about the world around you. Cognitive behavioral therapy is about changing the way you think, like your opinion about things. And personally, I find that to be sort of gaslighty in a lot of ways, right? Like I can tell myself, and this is DBT, I can tell myself that I'm a capable person and that I can do things and that I deserve things and all this, and that can be true. But if I were to do CBT and say, actually, I should be at peace with the terrible situation in the world, kind of the way that CBT goes is that you just want to change like your attitude about things, so you have a better attitude about things. And that's not helpful when it's actually perfectly reasonable to have a bad attitude and to complain about your situation in life. And so when you go to the hospital and you've got a terrible situation in life and you complain about it and they tell you, well, just accept it, use your radical acceptance or whatever, and then they don't actually help you solve those problems, it's very frustrating. And that's sort of the gist of my experience with these hospitals, is that I go in, they don't help me, they tell me to just feel better, you know, slap some medication on me, tell me to go to therapy and psychiatry and take medication and get a case manager that's probably also not going to help me. And then they send me on my way. Maybe into a worse situation than I went in, because now I don't have a job or a place to stay or a car, right? So anyway, if you've been to these hospitals, let us know in the comments if you have any experiences with them, positive or negative. Especially, I hear that the hospitals in other countries like Canada are a little bit better than here. I heard in some hospitals you can actually keep your phone, and some people actually vlog from inside the hospital. They actually document their experience with it, and they tend to have better experiences. So I've seen positive experiences with these hospitals happen. So if that's you, if you've had a positive experience, let us know. I would love to restore my faith in humanity and know that this is actually helping somebody. But also, if you relate to what I said here, also let us know in the comments. And like and subscribe. I am a homeless guy. I live in my car. I'm trying to fundraise for a van and trying to make videos so I can have an income. So if you'd like to follow my journey as I escape homelessness, be sure to sub to the channel, check out my other videos, and I will have some links in the description for my fundraiser and my Cash App and Ko-fi if you would like to make a tip, a one-time donation, and also my Patreon if you'd like to become a patron to support me monthly so I can keep making videos like this. And better videos. Better videos are coming. I just got a laptop, which means I'm going to be making gaming videos and some better editing, so maybe even video essays. So stay tuned for that, sub to the channel, and thank you so much for watching, and have a peaceful day.